your job as a social researcher is not really to describe the world. You know, the world is infinite, and the number of descriptions that could be made of it are also infinite. And so you need to make a decision as to where you are intervening that will give you the most consequence for the effort that you spend. And for her, I got the impression that, you know, really the question she always had at the back of her mind was, who is left out? So the way that she would decide what to study in any infrastructure would be to try and understand this question, who is left out? So she called the people left out of any infrastructure the orphans, the infrastructure's orphans. And I think this is very helpful. It's the way that I usually decide what to focus on. So for example, some of the work that I did on wireless networking and internet infrastructure, I focused on places that didn't have any good internet infrastructure, and I focused on how it developed, and that was really the same kind of impulse. Similarly, I wrote about the use of the internet in public places, which was also about, at the time, people who had no access to the internet anywhere else. So you see that also had a kind of the same impulse behind it. Likewise, in some of the work on even the work that might be more abstract about internet protocols or internet policy, you can ask yourself, you know, who is it that does not get to speak? Who is it that doesn't get, if they do speak, it doesn't get heard? And this is also a question of who is left out of the infrastructure. So I think that's been a goal for me. Although I wish I could tell you that there's a procedure for it. I'm not sure that there is. It's more of an intuition.
Christian, for some unknown reasons, I heard a distortion from your side.
Distortion?
Yeah, on the voice.
Okay. I also lost Polina. I still have her picture, but no video and no audio.
Turn off her video because she thinks that it's an internet issue. But I think it's a voice, it's a microphone issue. Can you please turn off and then turn on your microphone? It can help us.
Sure. Do you want me to actually disable the microphone and re-enable it, or just do mute and unmute?
Mute and unmute, they didn't help, so let's try to right. Do more hard thing.
I was trying just to turn on my video in.
How's this? It's better?
Yeah, it's better.
Okay.
Yeah, much better. Thank you very much. I think I have heard, and I hope it will be recorded, or we can just mend it on the when we'll make the text about who is left out, and this question, which is the key and most important for you. And this now I understand was one of other questions was about, let's say, micro and macro level. I mean, how do you deal with this? Maybe I can ask you, because just recently we have read an article by Paul Edwards about the levels in infrastructure, and so I'll ask him what is the question of scales important here for you, and if yes, then how do you solve it?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've read that piece. I think I might have a different view of it, and that's that one of the motivations for me, which is not always that shared among other researchers, even if they are studying infrastructure studies, is that I've been interested in the idea of looking at systems from below, or from starting from the everyday. I mean, the inspiration for this is a movement in American sociology from the 1960s called ethnomethodology. And the ethnomethodologists were very critical of social science. And they said that the social scientist is an arrogant jerk who shows up with categories. And when you tell the social scientist something, the social scientist says, well, you're saying something, but I think what you really mean is this category. So you think you're telling me this, but I'm the expert, and I know that you're really telling me about class, or you're really telling me about power or something. And the whole setup, they said, is rigged, and it's a power dynamic between the researcher and the people studied. And so their idea was that, you know, instead of this kind of starting with categories, you have to start from the interlocutors that you speak to, and they have to give you the materials for understanding, and you have to treat them respectfully. And so I think this movement, sometimes called ethnomethods, is very influential in people who are studying the internet with infrastructure studies. I don't think of Paul Edwards as being this approach, though. So I think that's a contrast between Paul Edwards and the way that I study infrastructure. So, for example, Bruno Latour is known for this actor network theory, where he says that all of life is like capillaries, and your job is to follow the threads and delimit the associations. And this is very similar to ethnomethodology, so I think it's very consistent. In fact, in his book, Reassembling the Social, I believe he said that it was very similar to ethnomethodology. So I think this is the approach that I take, is rather than starting with categories or levels or something like this, it's more of an attempt to trace pathways or follow associations or something like this. Again, it's hard to describe as a list of procedures. I think it's more like an intuition, where you're struck by something and it leads you to something else. I mean, the big challenge with all of these methods is really that the ethnomethodologists and Latour, they may say that they want everything to be a network of associations or come from below, but at some point they have to write the research, and it's a